The air in JFK's Terminal 7 thrummed with a chaotic energy, a symphony of rolling suitcases, chattering voices, and the amplified announcements of departing flights. The smell of coffee and hurried footsteps hung heavy in the air. Flight VS-45 to London Heathrow, scheduled for a 7:15 p.m. departure, was already boarding, a long line of passengers snaking its way towards Gate 4. Among them, a young couple, barely out of their teens, giggled excitedly, clutching boarding passes for their honeymoon. A sharply dressed businessman barked into his phone, his face a mask of stress, clearly finalizing a deal. A family with 3 young children, their faces alight with the thrill of the adventure, struggled to keep their energetic brood in check. It was a microcosm of the world, all gathered in this liminal space between destinations. Jack Littlejohn, with his easy smile and kind eyes, looked younger than his 29 years. His worn leather jacket and faded jeans hinted at a life of adventure, contrasting with the crisp suits of some of his fellow first-class passengers. He'd spent the last few weeks volunteering with a local homeless shelter, a habit instilled in him by his parents, who always emphasized the importance of giving back. He settled into his spacious seat in the first-class cabin, already anticipating the familiar comforts of the pre-flight champagne and the attentive service. His sister, Sarah, sat across the aisle, scrolling through her phone. Still trying to save the world, one comfy seat at a time, she teased him gently, a playful smirk on her face. Jack just grinned. He enjoyed the friendly banter. It was a comfort in the often impersonal world of air travel. Violet Allison moved slowly, her 88 years etched on her face in a roadmap of wrinkles, each one telling a story. Her hands, gnarled with age but still strong, gripped the handle of her worn, blue suitcase tightly. She was dressed in a simple, floral dress, a faded but well-loved garment. She refused the assistance of a passing airport employee with her bag, a flicker of stubborn pride in her eyes. A faint sigh escaped her lips as she looked down the long aisle towards her economy seat, a mixture of weariness and anticipation in her gaze. She'd spent a bittersweet 2 weeks with her daughter, Mary, in New York, the visit tinged with the unspoken worry about how many more such trips she had left. This visit had been particularly poignant. Mary had been hinting, gently but persistently, about Violet considering moving closer, a prospect Violet resisted with all her might. Something about the way Violet held herself, a quiet dignity amidst the chaos of the boarding process, reminded Jack of his own grandmother, a woman who had faced life's challenges with unwavering grace and a gentle spirit. He watched her for a moment, a wave of empathy washing over him. He knew that long flights, even in the best of circumstances, could be grueling, especially at her age. The cramped seats, the dry air, the general discomfort, it all added up. He hesitated for a split second, wondering if he was being intrusive, perhaps even patronizing, but the thought of her enduring that long flight in economy, when he had a perfectly good, empty seat available, spurred him on. He stood up, smoothing down his jacket. He approached her slowly, a gentle smile on his face, his hands held open at his sides, a non-threatening posture. "Excuse me," he said softly, his Scottish accent adding a lilt to his voice. "I couldn't help but notice. Are you traveling alone?" Violet looked up, her eyes, a faded blue but still sharp, assessing him with a mixture of caution and curiosity. With a hint of weariness, "Yes, dear," she replied, her voice a little raspy, but with a clear, well-spoken tone. "Back home to London after visiting my daughter." "It's a long flight," Jack said, nodding sympathetically. "I'm Jack, by the way." "Violet," she replied, a small smile flickering across her lips. "It's nice to meet you, Jack." He gestured towards her boarding pass. "Economy, I see. I know it could be a bit cramped back there." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I was a nurse for over 40 years, you know," Violet offered, a touch of pride in her voice. "Saw a lot of changes in my time. Back when I started, we didn't even have disposable gloves." She chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. "The things you young people take for granted." Jack listened intently, leaning in slightly. That must have been incredibly rewarding, he said, genuinely interested. And incredibly challenging, I imagine. What was the most difficult part, if you don't mind my asking? Violet looked down at her hands, her gaze drifting back in time. Oh, there were many challenges, dear. But the hardest was always seeing the suffering, especially in the children. You never quite get used to that. A shadow of sadness crossed her face. She then spoke of her late husband, a carpenter named Arthur, and how they'd built a life together filled with simple joys. Jack felt a lump forming in his throat. He could see the strength and resilience in this woman, but also the vulnerability. Violet, he said, taking a deep breath, I know this might sound a bit strange, perhaps even forward, but I'm traveling with my family in first class, and we actually have a spare seat. It's just sitting there empty. I'd be truly honored if you'd accept it. It would genuinely make me happy to know you were comfortable for the flight. You can stretch out, have a proper meal, really relax. She stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief, her mouth slightly agape. Oh, no, dear, she stammered, shaking her head. I couldn't possibly. That's far too kind, far too generous. I wouldn't want to impose. She looked flustered, almost embarrassed. The passenger next to her, a middle-aged woman with a kind face and a book in her lap, chimed in. Go on, love, she said, her voice warm and encouraging. You deserve it. Let the young man do something nice for you. It's not every day someone offers you a first-class seat. Violet hesitated, her internal conflict evident in her expression. Her heart ached with the longing for a bit of extra comfort. The prospect of a flatbed and a decent meal was incredibly tempting, but years of putting others first, of not wanting to be a burden, made it hard to accept such extraordinary generosity. Finally, after a long pause, a tear welled up in her eye. Thank you, Jack, she said, her voice trembling slightly. You're a very kind young man. A very kind young man indeed. Stepping into the first-class cabin was like entering another world. The hushed atmosphere, the plush, wide seats that reclined fully, the soft lighting, the attentive staff. It was all so different from the cramped quarters and the general hubbub she was used to in economy. The air even smelled different, a subtle fragrance of something floral and expensive. Leah Barry, the lead flight attendant, a tall, elegant woman with a warm smile, raised an eyebrow in surprise as she saw Jack guiding Violet to the empty seat, but a warm smile quickly spread across her face as she understood what was happening. Violet settled into the seat gingerly, as if afraid it might break. She ran her hand over the soft leather, a look of wonder on her face. Oh my, she breathed. This is incredible. Leah approached, offering a warm, moist towel. Welcome aboard, madam, she said with a genuine smile. Can I get you a drink? Champagne, perhaps. Violet, slightly overwhelmed, accepted the towel and gingerly wiped her hands. Champagne, she repeated, a hint of disbelief in her voice. Well, I don't usually, but yes, thank you. That would be lovely. She accepted the glass, the bubbles tickling her nose. She'd never tasted anything quite like it. She looked around, taking in all the details. Excuse me, dear, she said to Leah, pointing to a small panel on the armrest. What does this button do? Leah patiently explained the various controls for the seat, the entertainment system, and the call button. Violet listened intently, a childlike fascination in her eyes. She carefully adjusted the seat, finding a position that finally eased the nagging ache in her knee, a small groan of relief escaping her lips. This small comfort, impossible in her economy seat, felt like a miracle. Leah, throughout her years as a flight attendant, had witnessed countless acts of kindness, small and large. But something about Jack's gesture, the quiet, unassuming way he'd offered his seat, resonated deeply with her. It was a reminder that simple acts of compassion, of genuine human connection, could still exist in a world that often felt too busy, too impersonal, and too focused on self-interest. She discreetly snapped a photo of Violet, nestled comfortably in her seat, her eyes closed, a look of peaceful contentment on her face, a stark contrast to the weary traveler she'd seen boarding the plane. Today I witnessed a beautiful act of kindness on my flight, She began her post on her personal Facebook page, a platform she usually reserved for sharing pictures of her travels and family. A young man gave up his first-class seat for an 88-year-old woman traveling alone. It restored my faith in humanity. Hashtag kindness matters, hashtag Virgin Atlantic, hashtag unexpected upgrade. At first, the post received a few likes and comments from her friends and family, the usual circle of online acquaintances. But then, something extraordinary happened. The story, this simple act of unexpected generosity, began to spread, slowly at first, then like wildfire. The likes turned into hundreds, then thousands. The comments poured in, a torrent of positivity and appreciation. "This is so heartwarming," one comment read. "We need more Jacks in the world," said another. People shared their own stories of encountering kindness, of being on the receiving end of unexpected generosity. The post was shared, retweeted, and reposted across various social media platforms. It became a trending topic, a brief but powerful antidote to the usual barrage of negativity that often dominated the online world. Jack woke up the next morning after a surprisingly restful sleep in his economy seat. He'd found the experience rather humbling, a reminder of how most people traveled, to a flood of messages and notifications on his phone. He was stunned and a little embarrassed by the sudden attention. He hadn't expected or wanted any of this. He responded to a few messages, emphasizing that he hadn't done it for recognition or praise. "I just want to make her journey a little easier," he wrote in one reply. It was the right thing to do. Anyone would have done the same. The story, fueled by social media's insatiable appetite for heartwarming content, eventually reached the higher echelons of Virgin Atlantic. Richard Branson himself, known for his customer-centric approach and his own acts of generosity, was deeply moved by Jack's selfless act. It perfectly embodied the spirit of Virgin Atlantic, going the extra mile for customers, creating memorable experiences, and fostering a sense of community. The airline decided to capitalize on the positive publicity, but in a way that felt authentic and aligned with the spirit of Jack's gesture. They announced a golden ticket initiative, offering surprise upgrades to first class for passengers over the age of 80 on select transatlantic flights for the next month. The promotion was carefully worded, emphasizing the importance of honoring and respecting older travelers and highlighting Jack's act as an inspiration. Violet stepped off the plane feeling more rested and rejuvenated than she had in years. The long journey had felt surprisingly short, thanks to Jack's incredible kindness and the unexpected luxuries of first class. The aches and pains that usually accompanied long flights were noticeably absent. She felt pampered. Mary rushed to greet her at the arrival's gate, her eyes filled with tears of relief and joy. "Mom, you look wonderful," Mary exclaimed, embracing her mother tightly. "Did you have a good flight?" Violet recounted the story of her flight, her voice filled with wonder and gratitude, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "He was such a lovely young man, Mary," she said, squeezing her daughter's hand. "Such a kind heart. I've never experienced anything like it. He just gave me a seat. First class. Can you imagine?" She described the champagne, the comfortable seat, the attentive service, her words tumbling over each other in her eagerness to share the extraordinary experience. Jack's act of kindness, amplified by the power of social media and embraced by a corporation, became a reminder that even small gestures, seemingly insignificant acts of generosity, can have a profound and far-reaching impact. It wasn't just about one flight. It wasn't just about one upgraded seat. It was about inspiring others, about sparking a conversation about compassion, empathy, and the importance of connecting with each other, even in the most fleeting of encounters, even in the anonymous crowds of a busy airport. In a world often filled with headlines of division and conflict, of self-interest and indifference, Jack and Violet's story served as a beacon of hope, a small but bright light shining in the darkness. It was a testament to the enduring power of human connection, the enduring capacity for kindness, and the simple, transformative beauty of a kind heart. It was a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected upgrades come not in the form of a better seat, but in the form of a renewed faith in humanity.